Sam Harrison has been on all sides of creative communications, marketing, and branding, most recently on the academic and coaching side. He speaks, trains, writes, and coaches on creativity-related topics with a mission to help people expand and express their creativity and improve their presentation skills. In today's episode, we talk with Sam about staying curious, his neighborhood newsletter that has been telling Serenbe stories for years, and how to foster your creative enthusiasm and passion.
It tells us as we get older, we begin to lose, if we're not careful, some of those creative genes, some of those creative abilities, because we just don't question enough. We're not curious enough. We don't take risk enough. We don't open ourselves enough.
All right, Sam, welcome to Serenbe Stories. It's such a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you. Thank you, Monica. Great to be here.
Hi, Steve.
I mean, Sam, how appropriate that we're talking to you about Serenbe Stories. I mean, that's, more of a...
It's more of what Sam does. Sam is...
That's
Sam...
right. We'll get into that in the interview, why I'm saying that.
Definitely.
For those who don't know, those who are listening who do not live here, everyone who lives here knows about Sam and the great storytelling he does.
That's right.
Everything going on at Serenbe.
It's the super secret if you're a resident Town Talk newsletter. But Sam, one of the things we kick off our conversations is really telling the listeners how you found out about Serenbe. And you and your wife have been here for quite some time, so you've kind of seen it all. But tell us how you discovered Serenbe years back.
So we were in Atlanta, or right outside of Atlanta, and around Decatur. And I had left the world of product development and marketing and branding and was kind of deciding my next step. And I was teaching at Portfolio Center, which is a private school for graduate studies program for writers and designers and photographers. And it's a private school owned by, at that time, by a woman named Gemma Gaddy. And so I walked into Gemma's office one day and she said, "Hey, I just bought this lot down at a place called Serenbe, and it's south of the airport." Now, if you lived in Atlanta and somebody said south of the airport, your eyes would sort of glaze over because I had no idea what was south of the airport other than when I would fly in from trips and just see a lot of trees and nothing else. But she kept saying every time I would go in there, you got to go down there. It's going to be this environmental, artistic community. And they have these really weird lampposts, and you would love it. So on and on she went. So every Sunday morning or every Sunday, Hope, my wife, and I would have adventures in the city. We would go somewhere different to get something to eat or to see something. And so there was a new ice cream shop down near Grant Park, near the zoo. So we said, let's go down and get an ice cream. And so we did. And we were sitting there and I said, you know what, while we're down this way, we're already pretty far south. Let's go on down to this place that Gemma's talking about and just get her off our backs about seeing this place. So,
I love that.
So sure enough, we rode down and we rode in, and immediately we just were amazed at what we saw. Of course, the first thing we saw the stables and all the green surroundings, and went in, and Raina was at the sales office, which was then right across from the Daisy. And wasn't much else here. There was the Daisy and one row of houses in those townhouses. And she talked to us, and she was so nice and explained everything. And then we went over to the Daisy, and Steve was there, and Ross and Haverty was there. And they were very nice, talked to us about some of the artistic things that were going to happen. And just more and more, Hope and I just kept looking at each other. And by about 3:00, we were getting ready to leave. And I can't remember if it was the Bullocks or Chip and Raina said, we're getting ready to have a little open house with all the neighbors, just kind of a spur of the moment thing. Why don't you join us? And we did. And again, I mean, we've been to a lot of gatherings and a lot of social events everywhere, but it was a different feel. Everybody just seemed to be so comfortable with each other. And talked, and they were very nice to us. So we left that day, and I don't think we talked about half the way back. We were both thinking, and we at the time we had the house in Atlanta, but we also had a cottage in Highlands, North Carolina, and that's where we thought we would wind up. We had bought a lot next to us that we were going to build a larger house on. So we said, well, let's think about all this, and I guess within a week to 2 weeks later, we had bought a lot, and we wound up building before Gemma did. And subsequently sold our place in Highlands, and here we are.
I love it. Yeah. I think I remember that we were living in Grant Park. I remember that ice cream shop perhaps. And I love that your day just sort of kept flowing into another thing. That is very much what happens here, right?
All the time. Yes.
All the time.
And so many times, whether it's the friend or the spouse that first gets the idea, many times it's the friends that get ahead of them.
Right.
I think that's right. Yeah. And so many times too, Steve, it's not a logical decision. It doesn't seem like a logical decision at the time. It's like, well, let's just do it.
Yeah.
I often say that's what makes Serenbe so interesting, because it's all people that do not follow logic necessarily, but they're willing to follow their gut or their heart or however you want to do it.
Yeah.
That's true of almost every household here. There's few logical decisions that get us in there.
Yeah. I've heard that over and over, and I agree. I think that's how it's sort of self-selected because of that. You're right.
People follow their heart.
Yeah.
Speaking of heart, and I'll add in head, I really am very excited to talk to you about all of your work. And you mentioned Portfolio Center. Did you continue working at Portfolio and teaching there while you were in the early years of being down here, Sam?
I did. That's sort of led to how I got into what I evolved into, which was writing books and articles as well as speaking. When I was first started teaching there, and I was teaching some writing classes and some branding type classes, and I saw a lot of kids that were, I say kids, they were college graduates, but kids to me, they thought they were creative. A lot of them were very creative, but they had never really looked at their creativity and thought about how do I become more creative? How do I stay creative? How do I become creative when I need to be creative to come up with a product or a design or whatever? So I wanted to teach a creativity class. There was not a pure creativity class taught about what is the creative process. So I talked to Gemma about that. And of course, she was fine with it. And I happened to be in New York while I was thinking about this. And there's a fellow named Milton Glaser. He died a few years ago, but Milton Glaser is probably the most celebrated graphic artist in America. He came up with the I Love New York logo, the I Heart logo.
Yep.
He did that famous Dylan psychedelic poster. He's done a million things, but I had a conversation with him, and I was telling him that I was thinking about teaching a class on creativity. And he said, Sam, you can't teach creativity. And that was kind of a letdown. But he said, but what you can do is you can help people discover and uncover the creativity that's there, that they already have. Or you can help them rediscover it. Because a lot of times, no matter how creative you are, you have creative flaws. So that became my task and mission and what I wanted to do. So I started teaching a class there. That led to my first book called Zing, which was basically how to find inspiration, how to keep inspiration. And then that led to begin teaching and speaking on creativity. So that's how that all started.
Yeah. Well, tell us a little bit about Zing or Creative Zing is that a newer one, right? That you kind of have like you could fall into these different camps of creativity. So tell us a little bit about that because all of us, even if we are creative, right? Somehow we need to have inspiration. But tell us a little bit about your like thesis.
Yeah. So the thing that Zing started, and you're right. I had my first book was called Zing. Then I wrote two in between that, one called Idea Spotted and one called Idea Selling. And I'll get into that in a minute. And then my most recent one is called Creative Zing. And Zing has sort of become my unofficial trademark because I use that as a word that to me means being enthusiastic and passionate and involved. And I think we're always in one of three zones as people. We're either in a zombie zone, whether we're just kind of comatose and in our comfort zone and maybe not quite so creative, or we in what I call a zigzag zone where we are chaotic and sort of running in circles and again, probably aren't creative because we're not focused. And then there's that wonderful zone that I call the Zing zone where we are hitting on all cylinders and we're being creative. So what I attempt to do is to try to help people stay more in that Zing zone, that creative zone. There was an interesting study done a number of years ago where there was a test that NASA came up with. It was kind of a divergent thinking test. And what they would do, for instance, is they'd give someone an object and like a paperclip or rubber band and say, come up with as many uses as you can for this. So most people would come up 5, 6, 7, or 8. But if you came up with a much larger number, let's just arbitrarily say 20, they would label you a creative master, a creative genius. They gave this test, these social psychologists gave this test to hundreds of adults, and only 2% of those adults were classified as creative geniuses. They could come up to that amount. So that was interesting. But then those same social psychologists said, let's do this. Let's give this test to kids. So they got some kindergarten kids. They gave them the exact same test. The exact opposite happened. 98% of the kids fell into the genius or creative master category.
Okay.
What's even more interesting is that it was a longitudinal study. So they followed these kids and they gave them the same test 5 years later. 5 years later, only 38% of these same kids fell in that category.
Oh, no.
They gave it to them 5 years after that, and only 12% fell into it. So what does that tell us? It tells us is as we get older, we begin to lose, if we're not careful, some of those creative genes, some of those creative abilities, because we just don't question enough. We're not curious enough. We don't take risk enough. We don't open ourselves enough. And so we can, based on who we are and our lifestyle, we can go up and down with that. But what we need to do, what I hope to do with what I do when I write and speak, is to help people, remind people to do those things they did as children, to be more curious, to open themselves up, and to allow more of their creativity to come out.
Sam, how much of that is our educational system in addition to the built places that we have for kids to grow up in?
Yeah, a lot of it, Steve, of course. Yeah, I think that, if kids are quickly taught, don't ask so many questions in school, and don't be different, conform. And so the traditional education system plays a large part in that.
And aren't we removing art from a lot of our curriculum in our lower?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, that's what's so fun to see about the schools here when you see the kids outside in nature doing things, or seeing them sitting out front on the sidewalk and drawing on the sidewalk right outside of the school. I mean, that warms my heart because that's exactly what's needed. Yeah.
Right. And so you've been sort of you've been called a creative guide, right? Do you consider yourself sort of a coach? Do you think of yourself that way?
Yeah, well, yes, I think I try to coach, and again, that's just to nudge people back into what
Yeah.
they already have. I can't endow them with any of that, but
Right.
I
Like
think
Milton said, you can't make them creative.
no, but I think it's a lot of us looking. Yeah, you may be familiar. I don't know if you're familiar with outcome analysis versus process analysis.
Yep.
Outcome analysis, to put it in the sports vernacular. If you got a quarterback and he's throwing passes and he's having interceptions and he's not getting the passes to his receivers, he's got two ways of looking at it. He can look at it, well, I didn't throw passes very well, so I'm going to do better next week and I'm going to work harder to throw better passes. That's outcome analysis. Process analysis is he goes back and he said, okay, how much did I practice this week? How much sleep did I get last night? What was my mindset when I woke up this morning? And thinking about the whole process. So that's sort of what we have to do with our creativity. If we're not being creative for a while, if we feel like we're in a lull, it's looking back, okay, what have I done differently lately? How curious have I been? How much have I tried to expand outside of my comfort zone? So yeah, I can help coach people with talks or with one-on-one coaching, hopefully back into that zone.
Yeah. Who are you working with? Do you find yourself working with creative directors at different agencies or different brands, or sort of like who do you find you tend to be working with mostly these days, or I guess who's gravitating to your work? Because it's so interesting.
It's a good comment. It's a combination of, I never really analyzed it, but I would say about 20 to 25% of my audiences, either my readers or my audiences when I speak, would be quote unquote non-creative categories. I mean, that would be people in the food industry, transportation industry, hotel industry, something like that, that have to come up with ideas as managers or as leaders, but they're not considered in the creative category. And then probably another 25% would be marketing people, PR people, those type. Mm-hmm. And then probably the other 50% are graphic designers, product developers, product designers, writers, and that are every day having to come up with ideas, having to be creative, but who find themselves needing to rejuvenate their creativity. Mm-hmm, so it's kind of a combination of all three.
I was going to say, do you have, because I think the curiosity is a really interesting one. I mean, you hear about, changing your environment, whether that's moving rooms or going outside or, getting a little writer's retreat in the woods to change your environment. But if you can't do that, do you have some other things that you recommend people do to sort of kickstart the Zing?
Try new things. Keep trying different things and going to different places. I mean, you mentioned getting up and going to a different room or going to a different place, but it's keeping our minds open. I was speaking several years ago somewhere, and after the talk was over, different people coming up and saying things, and one woman was sort of at the back of the line, kind of standing to the side, and she came up after everyone else was gone. She said, "Can I tell you a story?" And I said, "Sure." And she said, "My mother was very ill several years ago, and actually she was terminally ill. She was about to die, and my two sisters and I were in our hospital room at her bedside, sort of watching over and attending to her. And she said, my mother's a very creative woman, very, very creative and very artistic, and always had great advice for her. But we knew she was dying, and so we were waiting to see what her final words were going to be to us. We knew she was going to give us some great advice. And so the woman who was talking to me said that my mother was fading in and out of consciousness. And one day she came back into consciousness and she said, "You girls come here. I have something I want to tell you." So she said, my two sisters and I looked at each other and we went over to the bedside and got close to my mother because she didn't have very much strength in her voice. And she looked at the three of us and she said, "Pay attention." And we all got really excited and we looked at her. And suddenly she just faded back out of consciousness. And she said about an hour later, the same thing happened. She said, "You girls come here. I have something I want to tell you." They came over. She said, "Pay attention." And then she didn't say anything else and faded back out of consciousness again. The third time they go over, she said, "Hey, girls, come here. Come here again. I want to tell you something." Again, she said, "Pay attention." And one of the girls said, "Mother, we are paying attention. What is it you want to tell us?" And she said, "That's it. Pay attention."
Pay attention.
and the woman who was telling me this said, "We realized that's what our mother had done all her life. She paid attention. She paid attention to us. She paid attention to cashiers in grocery stores. She paid attention to nature. She paid attention to things." And so she held up this bracelet, and on it said, "Pay attention." And all three of them have a bracelet that says "Pay attention." They wear to remind themselves to pay attention. So that's pretty much it. If we pay attention,
yeah,
then we'll almost always re-inspire ourselves and find inspiration.
Yeah, I absolutely love that.
Sure. I never heard that. That's great. And
Yeah,
so true.
Great.
I mean, many times the answer is right in front of us, or the answer is so simple, we keep looking for something more complicated. And that's the perfect example. She was giving you the message.
Exactly. And no, there's a second moral in that story.
Sometimes we're looking for these crazy, profound, and it's just a simple message. We were interviewing an ornithologist on a different podcast, and he said his daughter turned to him one day and just said, "Dad, we can always be better. Just be better." It's just a nice, right. Every day we can get better.
Yeah. Yes. I love that.
Yeah. Just simple. It doesn't have to be this, on high. But I love pay attention.
Einstein had a quote to that effect, didn't he?
Did he?
Yeah.
Probably.
It's something, simplest answer is the best answer or whatever. But, there was another experiment done with they took some, I think they were college students, I don't recall, but they had them come into a room and just look around the room, and they didn't tell them why they were doing it, but they just had them, and they had different objects in that room, and then they had them leave, and then they later asked them to list what they saw in that room. It was basically an observation study. Mm-hmm. Then they brought another group in, and they had the group put on lab coats like you wear, like scientists wear, or like doctors wear. And they had that group go in there and do the same thing and go out and write. And every time that group would have better observations because they had that coat on, they felt like they were scientists. They went in thinking they had to observe. And I think that's such a great study because it just reminds us that we have to remind ourselves to be observant at things. And so it's, particularly I walk around Serenbe every morning. Steve sees me. I pass him a lot of times because he takes morning walks too. And, every day I try to stop and hear three things, see three things, and possibly smell three things and touch three things. And that's such a great exercise because first it just gets me to pause, but it's amazing how I see different things, new things every time. So I should train myself to do that throughout the day because it would be good anywhere.
Yeah. I find, we're rushing from one thing to the next. And as you were talking about creativity, I'm like, strangely, I obviously haven't been on planes a lot lately, but I would find myself in a really creative place where I would have the opportunity to write when I was on a plane. And I think it's the distractions are gone, right? There's nothing really to do. I mean, now they're putting screens in front of us, but you don't have any everything's at the time, probably, years back, there's no Wi-Fi, there was no screens. And so you either had a book or you read the magazine, the in-flight magazine. And I do wonder if that's just sort of the lack of stimulation lets you almost be bored that lets you open up a little bit to being curious? Do you find that boredom is a good thing sometimes?
Yeah, well, I was going to ask you a question back on that, and then I'll ask yours. So, do you, as a writer, are you more of a cave person? I mean, do you like to just kind of nestle by yourself somewhere to write, or how does that work for you?
I think my biggest thing is I do need to be alone, and I need to find the time in mornings. Mornings are better. I'm just much more focused and I can really churn it out versus at the end of the day, I'm going to have to really, I don't know if I'm going to be quite as productive from a focused writing. But yeah, I guess I'm a little bit of a cave person when it comes to that.
Well, I think most writers, I know I am ambiverts, both extroverts and introverts, and so I need time with people and to get that stimulation. And I enjoy being with people, but I also need that time alone. How about you, Steve? When do you have your best ideas?
Oh, it's absolutely in the early morning hours, and many times it's. I feel that I'm almost channeling from sleep because I'll maybe have something that's troubling me the day before, and I'll wake up maybe earlier than usual, and I seem to just be able to sit down and I have the resolution, and it's as though it has come to me somehow during the sleeping hours. So.
That's great. Yes, I know that feeling. I think I can't remember if it was Thomas Edison or Buckminster Fuller, used to sleep in a chair. He'd let himself fall asleep in a chair in front of a fireplace with a metal ball bearing in each hand, so that when he fell asleep, he would drop the ball bearings. It would wake him up. And he said that was his best zone for having ideas, right where you just woke up. Isn't that funny? But that's
interesting.
Yeah,
really interesting.
I think there's a lot to the subconscious we all know that we just don't understand, and where is that we're able to tap into things that we are not in our conscious, and I think that goes back to what you're talking about, Sam, with kids. They tap into some of that in a more natural way, which is the creativity that we somehow learn to layer and logically think that doesn't make sense.
Totally. Yes. Because everything's nonsense until it makes sense, right?
Isn't Serenbe the example of that?
Did anybody tell you that when you started this?
Absolutely. Some of my friends in Atlanta came out and they wanted to know where the marijuana patches were because they were sure I was growing something.
Yeah, so some of the same people that told you what nonsense it was back then probably tell you how brilliant you are now, right?
That's right. I'm amazed in these 20 years, especially regarding environmental issues, how I've gone from this crazy tree hugger to this conservative visionary. and it's amazing. I think we forget how far the environmental movement has come from literally people thinking of it as 70s liberals. And now every Fortune 500 company requires a certified building because they understand all the economic and social implications with it. So 20 years is a pretty short time for a culture change that I think we forget about.
I think you're right. Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting.
Yeah.
But I think it does. What I admire about you, Steve, in terms of creativity, and I always have, is that you not only come up with ideas, but you also have that ability to implement ideas. That's the real gift. A lot of people can come up with ideas, but they can't bring them to fruition. And you've always been able to do that. So I've always admired that. It's
that maybe piece of a dysfunctional family. I learned how to switch between the right and left brain. Sometimes they were survival skills, but I think, when I look back, it's that understanding the difference and the skills on each side. They're very different.
It served you well.
And Sam, it's interesting you bring up sustainability, Steve. Was that even something that it probably wasn't even on your radar that existed, the sustainability tenants. I know for me, I had no idea. It was just the beauty of the place and the people. And that sustainability just became like a little bit of icing on the cake. But did you guys even understand the benefits of those things at the time?
Sam, I think she's asking, when you were looking at Serenbe, was that even in your scope of things to consider?
No, well, no, not really. I mean, certainly the environment. We love the look of the community. We did like the idea of the trails, but no, sustainability wasn't. The artistic and just the environmental were the two reasons, and quickly the sense of community. I mean, that's what everybody says. Everybody that I interview for Town Talk, when I ask, what's the best thing about living here, almost to a person, they say the people and the community. And I agree with that. I mean, that's been the surprise to me, is how we've been able to maintain a lot of that. I mean, it's sure has changed since the days when we could all get together on Sunday morning in the Daisy. Things have grown a lot, but there's still not only the sense of community, but the sense of taking personal initiative for things, which I find really good to see. I mean, we had to do that in the beginning because we didn't have any funds. The Institute didn't have funds yet to do anything, so we all just came up with our own initiatives to make our own entertainment and fun.
Yep.
People are still doing that today.
Yeah, people are still doing that.
Someone today was just sharing with me that they stumbled upon the ball field last night, Thursday night, and of course, you know what happens on the ball field on Thursday night. It's we have 5 teams now that are going on.
Ball, yeah.
And they were drawn by the laughter. They were on the street and they heard this laughter coming from around the trees, and they just thought it was the greatest thing happening. That the whole community was out there, and the cheering. They said they've never seen so much cheering for some of the stupidest things they'd ever seen.
Yeah, that's what's and that's just one guy decided to start doing that.
Yeah,
right.
John.
John just said, I'm going to start a softball league. And so he did it. And
so it's still live and well. It's a different scale than back in those old days when we pulled our chairs out into the middle of the street because nobody was there. But the spirit is clearly still there.
Exactly. And that's what I'm glad to see, because so many, and I think that's self-selecting. I think the people that moved here are people who tend to take the initiative, because if you want everything handed to you, you're not going to move to a place that's somewhat remote or doesn't have all the country club facilities, So fortunately, it's sort of self-selecting. So everybody come here is willing to take initiative and to join in and participate. So that's great.
Sam, tell us, how long have you been doing Town Talk? Tell us a little bit about what that is, why you started it, and how long you've been doing it.
Yeah. Golly, I think it's about, I think it's 7 or 8 years.
Wow.
I know. I was surprised too. I went back looking for an older issue, and I realized it's 7 or 8 years. And I've done newsletters. I've been a writer all my life. That's my core skill. I've studied design, I've studied photography, but writing was always my core skill. I had both of my older brothers have died. One recently, but both of them were journalists and writers as well. And my sister was an editor, magazine editor at one point. So it comes in our DNA. And I had done newsletters throughout my career in one form or another, and so. I was thinking about it. I mean, I love the publications, Monica, that you and your team do. But I said, well, maybe there's a place for just sort of a resident thing.
Yeah.
And I kind of had it bubbling around in my head. And Steve, you don't know this, I don't think. I'm probably telling you for the first time. But you and we were at the market on Saturday morning. And I was talking to you, and I said, by the way, Steve, and I pointed up at the market to a thin wooden box up on two poles. And I said, what is that thing up there? He said, it's a bat house. And I said, well, then you explained to me why it was there and that there were several around the community to attract bats and who would consequently get rid of some mosquitoes. And I started thinking after that, I said, well, if I didn't know that, a lot of people in Serenbe don't know that. So that's one reason right there to start doing the newsletters.
I'd never heard that.
So I can maybe be the kind of Town Talk, I think, kind of behaves like the nosy neighbor in the community. I mean,
I love
basically, I'm trying to answer the question, why is that here? Or what is that over there? Who are those people that are walking down the street? So that's what I try to do with Town Talk, is just make it a folksy kind of positive little newsletter for residents. It just talks about, I don't try to cover events. I leave that up to the rest of the public.
Let us do it. Yeah.
I mainly just try to cover the people and the environment around here as best I can.
Monica, I was just thinking, of course, we all have these electronically, but wouldn't it be fun at the first decade to actually publish a decade of Town Talk?
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, I was thinking that we should archive them somewhere and, at minimum in the HOA because, and obviously that would be up to Sam. I mean, I've always sort of taken it as a very personal, not private project, but a very, it'll come out when it comes out and when you've got the time. And I really love that because it's not a monthly, it's not a quarterly, it's just like, it's this really lovely, curious Town Talk. And there's a discoverability that like, it's going to come out. It'll keep coming out, but it may not be, so I don't know, that would be totally up to you. Of course, we would love to, that would be super fun to do that, okay, but maybe that's more of a resident gift or something. Nice but we should archive them somewhere, Sam. I don't know if you have them just, we should, I don't know, put them somewhere for the HOA at least.
Yeah, maybe we can figure that out.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
But I love a book, Steve, but yeah. I don't know. Sam maybe likes too private.
No, we could talk. Yeah, that'd be fun.
Yeah, everybody loves it. And I one of my favorite stories was the ducks. Can you share the duck story? Because it really is a good one.
Okay. So, gosh, I guess again, that's probably 6 years ago. I don't know. I was
at least maybe longer.
We had one duck, a Peking duck, white duck, up on the farm pond, and I would walk by there, and I would feel sorry for that duck by itself there. And I remember winter came and the pond sort of froze over and it was nestled down on one side but near the bridge. And I would go feed the duck there. And I just kept feeling sorry for it. So I decided that I was going to get a female. I asked Steve if it was okay if I did. And he said, sure. So I said, well, I'm going to find a female duck so it has a partner. And I started looking, well, it's more difficult than you might think to find an adult female duck. You can find baby ducks, but not adult females. So I started calling around and I called farmers and I called, I don't know who all, and finally I called an auction house for farm animals. And he said, no, we rarely get adult female ducks. And he was about to hang up. He said, I tell you what, though, down in Barnesville, Georgia, there's a guy, I happen to know a Vietnamese fella. His wife owns a nail shop down there. And he raises ducks. She said, call him, you can call the nail. He gave me the name of the nail shop. Call the nail shop and see if he might have one. So I called, and through some patching through, I finally talked to him, and he could not speak any English, and I can only speak about 3 words of Vietnamese. So it was an interesting conversation, but we finally got through to each other. And he said, I'll let you know, or words to that effect. So weeks went by, and one afternoon, about 2 o'clock on a Thursday afternoon, I get a call, and it was his son who could speak perfect English. And he said, "Dad has a duck for you, a female duck. If you can come down this afternoon, he'll give it to you." So I jumped in the car and ran down, rode down there and got this duck. He had built a little cage for it. And so I brought it back. I named it Rosie because the nail shop was named Rosie's Nail Shop. So I brought it back, and I got Hope, my wife, and we took it over to the pond. And I said, I'm going to put it in, and you get the male duck. The male duck was down on the other end of the pond. And so I put the female in, and she got the male duck rushed out into the pond, and they went out to the center of the pond, met each other, and swam off together. And that was the beginning of a number of ducks. They had, I don't know how many offsprings, but they've had a number, and those are still there. I think we still have 8 there.
Yeah. I don't know. I love that. Well, and that's like one fun thing we can tell our listeners. If you are staying at the inn or, wandering through the neighborhood, there is a lake right there that you will see a duck crossing, and that is where the ducks live. And so you can go see them. But one of the things that we always asked as well at the end of our conversation is, what's your favorite thing that you would tell somebody who's visiting or is going to come down that maybe they wouldn't know and they wouldn't discover on their own?
I would say, what I would really say is slow down. I mean, go see the stables. Let me look at I love the view of I can tell you more scenes that I love. I love the scene of the stables. Just, that's a beautiful scene to me. I think that from the wildflower field up to the end is just a beautiful walk and a beautiful view. I love the path behind the daisy. It's sort of like a highway in the woods. I just love that walk. Many times when friends have been down visiting, we'll leave the house and I'll walk through the woods over to the daisy, and they're always just amazed that you can walk 5 minutes through the woods and be at a coffee shop. But mainly, I think if I was king for a day at Serenbe, I don't think I would allow rental golf carts. I think I would force I think I'd force every visitor to walk around because you get such a different
to slow
view.
down.
You can drive by and see how beautiful Serenbe is, and you can see the houses. But it's not until you walk around and really look and see and stop and talk to people that you really understand Serenbe. So that would be part. And try to stay at night too. And somebody that was talking to one of your earlier podcasts about seeing the stars. I forget who it was.
It was Megan and Patrick Sharp.
Yeah. I think that's you need to experience Serenbe at night so you can see the stars as well. So
yeah. Well, and I always think that the street lamps to visit each of the neighborhoods at night, because they each have different street lamps.
Yeah.
Sometimes when I'm doing tours, it's during the day and the street lamps are phenomenal, but you're like, come back, like make sure you come back out at night because they're magical, even more magical at night than just the artistic product that you see on the street.
Yeah, go see a sunset on Tab Way through that pasture. Yeah, definitely.
Well, Sam, anything else you want to add as we wrap up here? It's been such a delight to talk to you about creativity.
Likewise. No, it's this is a creative place. I think there are a lot of reasons that Serenbe is creative and in the way it is. First of all, and Steve's talked about this, and of course Phil Tabb has. I really think there's a vortex here I gave Steve a book years ago. Steve, I don't know if you remember it. That's about Concord, Massachusetts. And back in the 1800s, in the little town of Concord, Massachusetts, lived Thoreau, Emerson, Henry Melville, who wrote Little Women? I can't remember. Mary
Alcott.
Alcott, yeah, she lived there. They were all in this small little place in Concord, and I think that happens. I think Silicon Valley is an example of that. I think there are a lot of examples all over the world, and I think that Serenbe is one of those. It's not only in the air; it's in the dirt here. I think Serenbe is just a creative vortex. So I enjoy being here. I enjoy seeing that, and I enjoy all that happens here. So I'm thankful to Steve for beginning this place, and I'm thankful that Hope and I are here, and that all of you are here.
Well, we're just delighted that you and Hope were some of the early people, because it's the people that show up and invest in Serenbe, not only by buying a house, but being part of the community, that make it what it is. And that's especially true for folks that were there in the early days, because it was a lot less obvious that this was going to be successful. And so we so appreciate you all being here. And also, Sam, I appreciate those books that show up every now and then from you, with these creative things keeping me in those loops of places I might not have always been. So I appreciate that as well.
Well, thank you. Likewise.
Well, thank you so much, Sam.
Thank you, Mike. Appreciate it.
See you on the streets of Serenbe.
Likewise. Thanks.
Thank you for listening to Serenbe Stories. New episodes are available on Mondays. Please follow us and leave us a 5-star review. And visit our website to learn more about guests, episodes, and everything Serenbe at serenbestories.com. This episode is supported by the Inn at Serenbe, nestled in the rolling countryside of the bucolic community of Serenbe, where guests can walk on the 15 miles of private trails through preserved forest land, the wildflower meadow, and the animal village. Relax at the pool, hot tub, or in rocking chairs on a wraparound porch. Play on the croquet lawn, grab a canoe, and jump on the in-ground trampoline. Connect with nature and each other, all while staying in a luxurious space at the Inn at Serenbe. Book your stay today at serenbeinn.com. SERENBEINN.com.